Hi girls, how are ye? We're starting another week and this week's story in Above the Clouds is Parvana's journey. So I'm starting on page 131. Parvana is a young girl. She is alone as her father has just died. A refugee in a land full of dangers, she must travel across Afghanistan in search of her mother and sisters who have been separated from her. Parvana disguises herself as a boy because the Taliban don't like women walking around on their own. So I'm going to turn over to page 132. The men, and I'm starting up here, the men around her were mostly old. The younger ones were damaged somehow, with an arm missing, or only one eye, or no feet. All the other young men were at war or dead. A lot of people have died here, the man who had helped her said. Sometimes we are bombed by the Taliban. Sometimes we are bombed by the other side. We used to be farmers. Now we are targets. Parvana's father hadn't been killed by a bomb. He had just died. Who are you with now, boy? Parvana's jaw hurt as she held her face tight to keep from crying. I am alone, she managed to say. You will come home with me. My wife will take care of you. There were only men at her father's graveside. The women had to stay in their homes. The Taliban didn't like women walking around on their own, but Parvana had given up trying to understand why the Taliban hated women. There were other things to think about. Come, boy, the man urged. His voice was kind. Parvana left her father's grave and went with him. The other men followed. She could hear the scuff of their sandals on the hard, dusty ground. What is your name? The man asked. Kazim, Parvana replied, giving him her boy name. She didn't think any more about whether to trust someone with the truth about herself. The truth could get her arrested or killed. It was easier and safer not to trust anyone. We will go first to your shelter and retrieve your belongings. Then we will go to my home. The man knew where Parvana and her father had set up their lean-to. He had been one of the men who had carried her father's body to the graveyard. Parvana thought he might have been one of the men who had checked in on them regularly, helping with her father's care, but she couldn't be sure. Everything about the past few weeks was blurry in her memory. The lean-to was on the edge of the village against a mud wall that had crumbled from a bomb blast. There wasn't much to retrieve. Her father had been buried in all the clothes that he owned. Parvana crawled into the lean-to and gathered her things together. She wished she could have some privacy so she could cry and think about her father. But the roof and walls were made of a sheet of clear plastic. I'm on now, girls, to plastic on the top of page 133. She knew the man could see her as he waited patiently for her to go home with him. So she concentrated on the task in front of her and did not allow herself to cry. She rolled the blankets, her extra shalwar kameez, and the little cookpot into a bundle. This was the same bundle she had carried on their long journey from Kabul. Now she would have to carry the other things too. Her father's shoulder bag where he kept his paper, pens, and little things like matches, and the precious bundle of books they'd kept hidden from the Taliban. She backed out of the lean-to, pulling the bundles out with her. She took the plastic down from where it had been spread over a ragged corner of the building, folded it up and added it to her blankets. I'm ready, she said. The man picked up one of the bundles. Come with me, he said, leading the way through the village. Parvana paid no attention to the rough, mud-walled houses and piles of bomb-damaged rubble that made up the village. She had seen many places like it travelling with her father. She no longer tried to, turning to page 134, imagine what the village might have looked like before it was bombed, with homes in good repair, children playing and flowers blooming. Who had time for flowers now? It was hard enough just finding something to eat every day. She kept her head down and kicked at pebbles as she walked. Here is my house. The man stood before a small mud hut. 5 times my house has been destroyed by bombs, and 5 times I have built it back up again, he said proudly. A flap of tattered green cloth covered the doorway. He held it aside and motioned for Parvana to go in. Here is the grieving boy, he said to his wife. The woman, crouching over her needlework, put aside her sewing and stood up. Parvana was young, so the woman did not put on her burqa. 3 small girls watched from a corner of the room. So I'm going to finish there, girls, on page 134.